Hi.
Daddy says I'm good for nothing. Mama says that is from him. My big sister thinks I'm laughing. Brother says it's in my
Can I not watch murder documentaries in peace?
Why are you watching murder documentaries?
Fuck yeah. I can't see over her head.
Get caught.
Yes, he's the one who. Let's not say that.
I'm tired.
Go sleep.
No.
Why is there so many hours of murder? Dude,
Why are you watching murder documentaries anyway?
I don't know. I won't watch murder documentaries.
Go with that first one there. It's probably a murder documentary. Ooh, so tired. Just go on YouTube and do Call Me Chris. She does murders.
I do other things. Joking. Kind of.
Just do Call Me Chris. Yeah, her. She does murder documentaries. Just click on her channel.
Person who knows. So you want to start a business? Do you want to look sexier than you already are?
The fuck?
Significant other, but you.
No. I don't.
What the?
A neat little house, picture perfect smiles. The kind of couple you'd expect to see framed in wedding photos and in magazines. Not in police files. But they looked like a dream. Like the dream. Young, attractive, and confident. But behind closed doors, beneath the rehearsed charm and the fairy tale life, something was off. And these monsters didn't just hide in the shadows, they were center stage in the spotlight. This is the story of the Barbie and Ken killers. Crime,
Bobby and Ken.
cops,
Bitch.
serial killers,
I
and
can't see it all live. Careful.
A little sauce
No,
on for you
no.
today.
Is that
Today
okay?
we are talking. We are in all seriousness talking about a very disturbing case. One that took place in
No, you
Canada.
don't.
So
Yeah,
without
I
further
do.
ado,
I
let's
look
unbuckle our
very.
seatbelts, go mock ride down the
I looked
highway,
better
slam the
last
brakes,
night.
and bust through this windshield into this
That goes
case
to different
together.
things.
Ow.
You die crying with Call Me Chris.
I love this YouTube channel.
Slowly upgrading my
Shout out to Call Me
An
Chris.
article has made it ridiculously
Watching a
easy.
murder
I picked
documentary
up
right
a
now.
couple of mid-century modern pieces, and the quality hit
She
me
just elbowed
immediately.
me.
The weight,
In the face.
That was not my
the
face.
fact that it came
That was
assembled,
somewhere
which
lower.
I like a lot. It actually feels like real furniture, not something that's going to fall apart in 6 months. And what I love is that everything article offers is curated. No filler, no throwaway pieces. It all just works together. So you can mix and match without your place looking like a random furniture showroom. Plus, their customer care team is available 7 days a week, and they even offer free interior design help, which comes in clutch if you're very indecisive, like myself. An article is offering our listeners $50 off your purchase of $100 or more. So just visit article.com/cccm, and the discount is applied automatically at checkout. That's article.com/cccm. Thank you to Article for sponsoring this video, letting me get amazing furniture and supporting the channel. And let's get back to it. Tammy Homoka was born in
Oh my god, it looks like Barbie!
Ontario on New Year's Day, 1975. It was a birthday forever tied to celebration and the promise of new beginnings. As she would be the youngest of 3, Carla came first, and then
Oh my gosh, she's fucking Pennywise. Did you see that smile? Did you see that? She was like,
quickly defining her place as
I was like,
Lady
girl,
Homoka.
Pennywise.
And as a child, she
Girl
was
smiles
always
Pennywise.
moving. She ran and played and competed.
Oh,
And sports came
guys.
very naturally to her, and people noticed
Guys,
her
you're so
abilities
gay.
really early on. So athletics were at the heart of her
Look at the
identity
double
at that
chin,
point,
bro.
and her childhood as a whole appeared innocent and unremarkable in the best way. And her and her family would go on vacations, and those vacations were spent out at a Sorry if I'm saying that
Why'd
wrong,
you
where they
scream?
would pass the days with
I'm not
swimming
touching
and
her.
This is
fires and
Essay.
shared
Girl!
meals. Just
You
a
made that
simple
personally.
kind of life, but beautiful.
No,
And
you
Tammy looked
did.
up to her older
did.
sisters,
You
especially
did. Next time you do that,
Carla.
I'll
She
elbow
wanted
you
to
in the
be
face.
I don't blame
constantly
you.
following her
Blame me.
around, admiring everything that she did.
Yeah, so
Carla, on the
slow.
other hand, tried keeping her distance.
Alright, that's enough.
Or
Okay.
just tolerating her rather
I
than
need to pillow
embracing
fuck
her.
this shit,
Which is
man.
quite common sisterly dynamic, especially
Girl,
with
why'd
Carla
you
that
just
age.
see
She
what
just wanted
Oh, wait,
her
never mind,
independence.
she's
She
not.
didn't want to be babysitted
I need
all
a
the
pillar.
time.
Fuck this
So
shit.
by 1990, Tammy was
I'm
already
not
15 years old, a grade 10 student at Sir Winston Churchill Secondary
She
School
went live
in
without
St.
me
Catharines.
realizing it.
And her life followed a very steady schedule of school during the week and sports whenever she could possibly play them. And soccer was her true biggest passion, but she also
I just
loved
realized
track
my
and
pants are
field
inside
and
out.
cross-country. She excelled at all of them. The Homoka household was chaotic, and Carl, Tammy's dad, worked as a traveling
That's why I didn't
salesman.
feel
And
comfortable
Tammy was
last
known
night.
for his easygoing manner and
Okay.
general friendliness, and he also
It's
had
because she
a
got
very thick
changed in the
accent
door.
and a very contagious charm. And Dorothy,
Wait, did you
Tammy's mom,
realize?
was a school secretary
Why
and
did
managed
you
the
say
house. And
that?
Carla, Tammy's sister, described
Because
her as a supermom, capable of anything and everything. So the family would move
I
around
already
a
knew.
few
I just
times
didn't tell
before
you. I was waiting for
settling
Carla
on
to come
Donald
get you,
Street in St.
so that you didn't
Catharines.
change in the
And they
door.
built a swimming pool in the backyard, which became a gathering place in their home.
next
And
time.
people would constantly come over, making summers loud and really busy. But
What are you
Christmas time
doing?
was the true
She's
heart of the
touching me.
Homoka
I
family
don't know.
calendar.
Uh-huh.
Because year
I
after
could
year,
read
the
this
house
blanket
was
off
filled
right
with
now.
relatives, neighbors, friends, and anyone that could attend. So the door was always open with Carol and
No.
Dorothy ready to hand you a drink at any moment. And somewhere in the midst of all the merriment, a photo
Die.
of the three sisters would be taken.
Die.
Shoulder to
Did you not
shoulder,
look like
kneeling and
sisters?
smiling in front of the tree. And these
They
sets
look
of
like
photos
murderers.
filled their photo albums, and each
Just like
daughter
what
seemed to
that
have
does.
her own role in the history.
No, she looks like Pennywise.
Carla would be known as the smart one, and Laura would be the social one, and Tammy
No.
was the athlete, of course. And she would fully embody that role. And on top of that, Tammy was also outgoing and just full of enthusiasm and willing to fully throw herself into whatever she did. And also, she was deeply, deeply caring, doing anything to help the ones she loves. So this holiday season was
bit
shaping up to
far.
be just like the
Shut
rest.
up.
The family was gathered on the evening of December 3rd, decorations were up, and the home videos captured
hell I
laughter
immediately
and
realized
joyful
that.
Bro,
moments. At some point during the evening, Tammy ventured down to the basement rec room, and Carla was there, and so was Paul. Now, Paul was her fiance that had become a regular part of the family. And at this point in the night, Tammy's parents had gone to bed
Okay.
upstairs, and Lori
Go
was
fuck
elsewhere
yourself.
in the house.
Okay.
So Tammy's loved ones were all near the
I'll
people
bet you
she
do
really
every time,
trusted
dog.
the most. And
Oh,
all
me.
seemed to be merry.
No,
and
Fuck
happy.
off.
But before we get into what happened next, we need to understand who Carla really was. So the 5 years separation in age between Carla and Tammy shaped the relationship from the very beginning. By the time Tammy was old enough to follow her older sister around, Carla had already decided she existed on a whole different level. She was older, she was above it all. And even though they lived in the same house and answered to the same parents, in Carla's mind, they didn't live in the same world. Yet, when Carla suffered from asthma attacks, it was usually Tammy who stayed by her side, helping her through them. And Tammy would do anything for anyone, but especially for Carla. She looked up to her as an older sister. And as the girls got older, the Homolka household grew louder and busier. And boys started coming around more frequently. And to anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a vibrant home full of outgoing teenage girls. And Carla was described as someone with deep sensitivities around rivalry and humiliation. She needed to feel superior. And as Tammy grew into adolescence, healthy and athletic and naturally likable in ways that Carla simply was not, the gap between them became harder to ignore. But Carla was the eldest daughter, and with that position comes certain responsibilities and privileges. And by the time both her sisters arrived, she had become used to being the center of attention. And her childhood looked quite different from Tammy's, not because of a difference in parenting style, but due to her own interests and strengths. Because Carla wasn't drawn to the world of sports or physical activity, but instead enjoyed more intellectual pursuits. So while Tammy would effortlessly move through the outside world, Carla turned inward, and she'd spend hours reading and drawing, building worlds in her head, controlling the stories. And her health also brought its shares of complications, because Carla suffered from chronic asthma, and the attacks could be rather serious. And sometimes it would be brought on by nothing more than excitement, and sometimes severe enough to land her in the hospital. But with illness came attention, and with pain came care. And at some point, Carla learned a lesson about vulnerability. It could be a tool to make people focus on you. And she quickly demonstrated her intelligence in school, where her teachers recognized her smarts when she was still very young. And she would learn to read faster than most, and later testing showed her IQ to be above 130. And her memory was exceptional, and she just absorbed information like a sponge. And Carla also understood that she was different from those around her, and she believed she was special because of it, or better than people because of it. Because at one point, after Paul, Carla's fiance, had entered the picture, Tammy showed affection towards him, and the two sisters clashed openly. And whether Carla was consciously aware of any other building of resentment is impossible to know. But the groundwork was laid. So Carla went to the same school Tammy would later attend, Sir Winston Churchill Secondary School in St. Catharines. And she continued to thrive academically, and teachers took a liking to her, because she spoke up in class and carried herself with confidence, rarely seeming uncertain about anything. But she wasn't part of the popular crowd necessarily, and had no interest in being part of it, because remember, she thought she was kind of above everyone. And in her mind, she was just meant for something bigger, something beyond her classmates and current circumstances. So people who knew her in those years described her as stubborn and strong-willed. And once Carla set her sights on something, she didn't let go until she had it. So she wasn't easily intimidated by anyone, and her interests shifted as she got older. And the childhood books gave way to romance novels, then to mystery novels. And she allegedly became obsessed with crime after discovering Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. And she started writing her own stories, and a theme emerged. And nearly all of them centered on a girl who was adored, a princess type, claimed by someone who would never let her go. And when Carla became interested in something, she fully consumed it. And friends noticed the intensity, and some found it unsettling. And she immersed herself in Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, watching it hundreds of times. And she wanted to be Olivia Newton-John, dressing and dancing just like her. And there were incidents during those years that stuck with people, like she threw a friend's pet hamster from a second-story window, and it took the hamster 2 weeks to die afterwards. And Renya, Carly's friend, noted that she, quote, showed no remorse and looked like she enjoyed the whole thing, unquote. Dear God. And Carla later made Renya dig up the hamster after it was buried so she could mess with it. Red freaking flag. And she also snuck out to dig up her cat, Mishka, at one point, just to see what the dead body looked like. And at the same time, Carla projected a completely different image, because she loved animals and talked about wanting to become a veterinarian someday. And in class, she refused to harm insects, even dissecting a worm. And she once told some boys in her class, quote, "You shouldn't kill it, it's wrong to kill anything," unquote, when they were about to step on a beetle. So to anyone on the outside, she seemed very gentle and compassionate, but both versions of Carla existed at once. And she experienced mood swings, and one friend noted, quote,
Oh, I think she has a bipolar disorder.
Other times, she would hardly speak at all for weeks at a time, unquote. And by her mid-teens, she had started experimenting with sex and with drugs and with older boys. And relationships came and went quickly because she got bored pretty easily. Because what she wanted was something that felt bigger than ordinary life, something exciting in her eyes. And she even formed the exclusive Diamond Club with her friends, where they talked about moving to California, and a rich man's engagement ring would be their ticket to anywhere outside of St. Catharines. And she also found interest in the occult, reading books about witchcraft. And her favorite book was allegedly about satanic abuse. And by the time she was 17, Carla had taken a job at a pet shop inside the Penn Center Mall. So perfectly aligning with the vision of herself she wanted people to see as responsible, intelligent, and gentle with animals. And then she would finish high school and receive acceptance letters from universities, but turn them all down because university just felt too slow for her, too confining, because she wanted more. She's just always wanted more. And around the same time, her relationship with her father began to worsen, and she saw him as weak, a man who didn't measure up to the life she had already started imagining for herself. Because she wanted a man who could fulfill her fantasies that had been living in her mind for as long as she could remember. And growing up, Carla had collected dozens of Barbie and Ken dolls, and she loved everything about them. Quote, because everything about them was just so perfect, from Barbie's hair to house, even her underwear. It was a wonderful pretend family in a beautiful pretend world, unquote. And now, in her teens, she projected that perfection and pure image to the outside world. Meanwhile, she continued exploring her sexuality with a special appreciation for kinkies, trying out handcuffs, and more. And Carla would love dirty talk, quote unquote. And even with that pristine outer-facing image, later psychiatric evaluations would claim, quote, Homoka remains something of a diagnostic mystery. Despite her ability to present herself very well, there is a moral emptiness in her which is difficult, if not impossible, to explain, unquote. So by the fall of 1987, Carla's desperation for something greater was at an all-time high. But little did she know, she was about to meet Paul Bernardo.
Bro, get off, you stupid advert.
It's funny how some kids are bad and get expelled and others are good and use Medley. Medley is the sponsor of today's video and
I'm surprised I'm not
So
expelled.
Paul Kenneth Bernardo
I'm almost
was born
expelled.
the youngest of 3 kids on August 27th, 1964, in Scarborough, Ontario. And on paper, the Bernardos seemed respectable. His father, Kenneth, worked as an accountant, while his mother, Marilyn, had grown up in a stable, affluent household after being adopted as a young child. But inside the home, it was a different story entirely. Kenneth was violent and verbally cruel, and he belittled his wife openly, calling her a bitch and a big fat cow. But that was the least of his offenses, because he was a predator. Because in 1975, he was charged with child molestation, and he was known around the neighborhood as a peeping Tom.
Hi.
He used his own daughter, and he even asked his own daughter, and sometimes in front of other family members, this man was a monster. So the abuse didn't happen in secret, it happened openly and brazenly, as if the rules that governed other families simply didn't apply to theirs. So he made no effort to hide it, and no one stopped him either. And the neighbors knew him too for who he truly was. They called him a peeping Tom, because they would catch him lurking outside windows after dark. The police are a thing in this era. What's going on here? Call the cops. And luckily, someone did. And in 1975, he was charged with child molestation after assaulting a girl who lived nearby. So the household Paul grew up in was dysfunctional, to say the least. It was actually just predatory. And young Paul was watching, and young Paul was learning, absorbing lessons about what men were allowed to do in his mind, and about what they could get away with. And Marilyn, for her part, battled severe depression and anxiety. And as the years passed, she pulled further and further away from the family, becoming isolated. But the most damaging truth of all remained buried, because Paul was not actually Kenneth's biological son, because Marilyn had conceived him during an affair years earlier, and the secret had been kept from Paul his entire childhood. Yet even before anyone told him, Paul seemed to sense something was off, because he always felt like he didn't quite belong, like he was being treated differently, and that unease would never leave him. And despite the chaos at home doors, Paul learned to perform, and he was polite and smiled easily, and adults found him charming and well-mannered. And he joined the Scouts and earned the Chief Scout Award even. And he later worked as a camp counselor where parents trusted him and the kids loved him. But there were early signs, and around the age of 10, he and friends started setting fires with magnifying glasses. And he learned very early how to split himself in two, and the gap between the boy people saw and the life he actually lived became one of the defining features of who he really was. Similar to who? Carla. But Paul went to Sir Wilfrid Laurier High School in Scarborough and graduated in 1982. And from there, he enrolled at the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus to study accounting, following in his father's footsteps. And physically, he drew attention. As a tall, blonde, impeccably groomed young man, he looked like someone people trusted instinctively. Not me. I don't trust adult blonde men. Out of the gate, at least. I don't know what it is, but I just don't. Okay? I feel like a lot of us can agree. If you're an adult man with blonde hair, sorry, this doesn't apply to you. You're a good person if you watch this automatically. Anyway, but before college, at the age of 16, Paul's world would shift. And during a heated argument between his parents, Marilyn told Paul the truth about his father. Kenneth was not his real dad. And Paul met the situation with immediate disgust, followed by rage. And he turned on his mother, hurling the same degrading insults he had spent his childhood carrying inside of the house. And the revelation did more than just anger him, it shattered the already fragile foundation of his identity. Because for years, Paul sensed something was off, that he was treated differently, and that he didn't quite belong. And now he understood why, because he wasn't Kenneth's son. He was the product of his mother's affair, living proof of her betrayal. So the man who had raised him, the man whose footsteps he had followed into accounting, wasn't his real father. And some who studied Paul later would point to this moment as a psychological turning point. The moment when whatever fragile sense of self he had constructed just came apart, and something darker took place. And he began calling his mother the horror of the world. And she would call him a bastard from hell. God, this family is just evil. Bad family. So the words just became weapons, and the damage was permanent. And control became the defining feature in his relationships. And girlfriends from those early years would later describe him as possessive and domineering. Because when a young woman tried to end things with Paul, Paul responded by violently destroying her things in a fire. Can't imagine why she broke up with you, Paul. That's crazy. But this behavior only intensified with time. And by his early 20s, a clear pattern started to emerge. Because Paul was everything a partner could want at the start. He was attentive and generous and charming, what we would call now love bombing. And he impressed the families and warmed up to them, playing the role of the ideal boyfriend with precision. But once he felt secure in the relationship, once he believed he had control, the abuse would start. And he'd humiliate them in public. Then he'd escalate his aggression in bed. And then the relationships would become more and more violent, and he'd threaten to kill them if they ever told people about the abuse. And some of the women he dated had the courage to go to the police, thank goodness, and restraining orders were filed, but still, nothing stopped him. So Paul's understanding of women was built entirely around domination. He was never looking for a partner, he only wanted someone to control. And during his university years, he shared fantasies with friends that went far beyond troubling, including the Virgin Farm fantasy, which he described to his friend Van initially as a, quote, stockpile of women that he wanted to have sex with him, unquote. But eventually became a place that he would breed virgin girls to disgusting. So he spoke about women as though they were objects. And a friend, Alex Smyrnis, mentioned that Paul, quote, preferred women who were petite, small, and not too bright, unquote. And also said that he, quote, often had 2 or more girls on the go at the same time, unquote. So his real-world behavior grew increasingly more violent, and he'd demand total submission during sex, getting pleasure from causing pain. So he's a sadist. And he'd refer to himself as the king and expected his partners to treat themselves as servants. And their fear and their discomfort and their suffering excited him. But to the outside world, Paul appeared to be succeeding. After finishing his degree, he landed a position as a junior accountant at a respected firm. And he dressed well and spoke with confidence and invested heavily in his image. And he bought all sorts of self-improvement and get-rich materials, implementing them at his job and at bars when he would try out new pickup techniques. But behind the image, he had already become a predator. And before Carla ever entered his life, Paul had been attacking women, and not just the ones he was dating. Young women, teenage girls. He stalked them after dark, often near bus stops in quiet neighborhoods, and he used a knife to make them cooperate. And during the assaults, he talked constantly, demanding specific words from his victims, just total incomplete submission from them. Because control alone wasn't enough for him. He needed absolute domination. And at a local bar one evening, an acquaintance recalled that he even, quote, started talking about committing the perfect murder. And, quote, if you were ever to kill someone and wanted to dispose of the body, cut the body up, put it in cement, and drop it in the river, unquote. That is what Paul would say to this acquaintance. So by day, he played the part of an ambitious young professional, but by night, he prowled the same Scarborough streets where he had grown up. So Paul and Carla first crossed paths in October of 1987 at a hotel restaurant in Scarborough, and Carla was there for a pet convention, and she was 17 and Paul was 23, and the attraction between them was immediate. And within hours of meeting, they were alone in a hotel room. And by the time the night ended, they had slept together. But unlike Paul's usual routine, he didn't disappear afterward, and he actually kept in touch. And to Carla, Paul seemed like everything she had been waiting for. He was older and successful, and he had money and spent it freely, making her feel chosen. And she'd later say that she knew almost immediately that she was going to marry him. And to Paul, Carla represented something he had never encountered before. She was young and eager, but most importantly, she was receptive. Other women backed away from his darker impulses, but Carla didn't resist. She leaned in, validating him. She participated willingly, just a couple of psychopath monsters. Because Paul had spent years learning how to identify women who might embrace domination. And in Carla, he found a partner. And by the time their lives became intertwined, Paul was already a dangerous man living two lives. But now, for the first time, he wouldn't be operating alone. So the relationship between Paul and Carla outwardly looked like a whirlwind romance. They became inseparable almost from the moment they met. And Paul drove hours to see her, and Carla rearranged her entire life to accommodate him. And Paul played his part flawlessly. He paid attention to her, showered her with gifts, took her to upscale restaurants, and spoke to her as though she were the only woman in the world, love bombing. And Carla gave herself over to him completely, and she described a perfect relationship in letters to her friends saying, quote, Paul and I are happier than ever. He's being so great, so romantic, but that's typical of my honey, unquote. But there were no red flags in her own telling. She was all in, and early in the relationship, Paul even asked her, quote, what would she think if he was a rapist? No red flags there, Carla? Okay, you monster. And she would think it was cool. I have no words. And according to one account, he started to women in earnest after that conversation. But the relationship continued progressing quickly, and the two were engaged on December 24th, 1989. And the Homoka family saw nothing alarming either, because Paul was always polite when he came around, charming not only Carla, but all of them as well. And he fit right into their family gatherings seamlessly. But what none of them could see was how quickly affection had already begun to turn into something else. Now, behind closed doors, things changed quickly. Paul introduced violence into their sex life almost from the beginning, framing it as exploration, and Carla went along with it willingly, even enthusiastically at times. And Paul documented what they did together, and he took pictures of their acts, and Carla happily posed for them, and none were taken without her awareness or consent. Note that. She consented to all of this and was enthusiastic about that, all right? And one picture in particular showed the two intimate while he strangled her with a rope and held a knife to her head. And Stephen Williams, author of Invisible Darkness, describes, quote, Carla, handcuffed on her knees and begging for him, was scratching an itch, unquote. And friends of Carla's discovered handcuffs in her bedroom. And when they asked about them, she casually explained that Paul enjoys playing games in bed. And the violence only escalated from there. And Paul allegedly began hitting Carla during arguments in addition to during sexual encounters. So his need for control bled into every corner of her life, dictating what she wore, how she styled herself, what she ate, and how she behaved. And he constantly insulted her, calling her ugly and fat. And Carla absorbed those insults, even writing them down. So no, I don't obviously agree with him calling her those names, and I feel bad that he called her those names, but I'm not letting her off just because she stayed in this relationship. And we're going to get into it more, but I'm going to let you paint your own picture of what's going on, all right? But she would treat these insults like instructions, rules for how to stay in his good graces. And she even wrote a self-improvement list. Quote, be a perfect girlfriend for Paul. Remember you're stupid. Remember you're ugly. Remember you're fat. I don't know why I tell you these things because you never change, unquote. Very sad. Very sad. But also, I don't feel bad for her because what she's gonna do. I don't know. And because Carla never tried to leave. She didn't go to the police or confide in friends or family. She just adapted her behavior to meet his expectations. And it wasn't in a Stockholm syndrome type way, because I do have empathy for women that are stuck in relationships like that, and they actually think those things about themselves and they feel like they can't get out. This is not the same thing. Let me make that so very clear, okay? There might be a tiny little small element of that, but that does not rid her of the things that she will commit. Because Carla was not passive, and she absolutely was not helpless. And in other areas of her life, she remained confident and assertive. So the relationship was abusive, no question, but it was not a simple dynamic of predator and prey. The motivation and participation seemed to run in both directions.
Are you serious? I just got coffee, for fuck's sake.
Pleased to meet you, Stitchhead.
Creature, these are our monsters.
Boy,
I'll make you famous.
so as the relationship grew stronger, Carla noticed something Paul paid special attention to, and that was Tammy, her younger sister. He was always watching her and finding excuses to be near her. And Paul later confirmed that his attraction to Tammy, quote unquote, began in July of 1990. So that summer, his demands escalated, and he told Carla he wanted to have sex with Tammy. And Carla would later testify that she was, quote, totally against the idea, unquote. Bombastic side-eyeing Carla right now, and you'll understand that later on. But she claimed Paul threatened her and hit her and wore her down over time. There's nothing you could do to me that would force me to let you do something to my sister. You would have to kill me before that happened. So shut the f up, Carla. You know? I'm getting angry in this one. I'm sorry. I'm getting angry in this one. Because the evidence tells a completely different story also. Because Paul's obsession with Tammy would deepen. And he started looking through Tammy's bedroom window. And he would enter her room at night to masturbate while she slept. And Carla even helped by breaking the windows in her sister's room to give him access. Monster. But Paul's focus was singular, and that was virginity. Because Carla wasn't a virgin when they met, and he never let her forget it. And he called her used goods. And in his mind, this meant that Carla owed him something, and she had taken something from him, and now she needed to give it back. And he would actually make her wear Tammy's clothes during their sexual encounters, and had her say specific things like, my name is Tammy, I'm 15 years old, I'm your virgin, and I want to marry you. It's just, if there wasn't already a trigger warning, I apologize. Here's a trigger warning. Like, it will just get worse from here. But for a sister to be okay with that and to stay in a relationship with someone that is willing to just put their own sister in the situation, it makes me ill. It makes me sick to my stomach. But that resentment eventually turned into a demand, and so Carla agreed to give Paul what he wanted. And she promised him her sister as a gift to satisfy him and secure the relationship. And Paul insisted Tammy would never know, that it'd be brief and no real harm would come from it. And she believed him, and Carla later framed her reasoning as a way to minimize risk and take control and keep it all in the family, instead of allowing Paul to seek out other young girls who might expose him. So she's protecting him by letting him her sister, instead of letting him get exposed, instead of reporting him before he can do anything to anybody else. So yeah, you're equally the monster, Carla. And criminal profiler Candace Scrappick offered a different interpretation. And like myself, she believed Carla was a malignant narcissist who couldn't handle her fiance's attraction to her younger sister. Ding, 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 we have a winner. And her solution was simple. Remove Tammy from the equation. And Carla chose to prioritize her relationship with Paul over her sister's safety. But the first